Understood bạn không muốn thấy bất kỳ chain of thought hay mã Python nữa và bạn muốn một bản kịch bản hoàn chỉnh, mượt tự nhiên đúng yêu cầu về độ dài, phong cách, nhịp cảm xúc, ba hồi twist kết mở và hoàn toàn độc quyền. Dưới đây là phiên bản hoàn chỉnh một mớp 100 tu, viết bằng dòng Mỹ móc mạc, giàu cảm xúc liền mạch, không xuống dòng thừa, không dầu hoặc và có call to action mạnh cuối kịch bản. Voiceover script approx 1550 words. You ever have one of those nights where the air feels heavier than usual, like something's waiting on the other side of your door? Yeah, that was me, standing in my tiny apartment at Holloway Court trying to ignore the sound of my stomach arguing with the universe. I had $11 to my name, one last meal sitting in the fridge, and a daughter who believed I could fix anything. And maybe I believed that too, or maybe I was just faking it hard enough to convince myself. Either way, life felt familiar, predictable, safe in the way broken things can sometimes be safe. Then 3 knocks hit my door like punches. At first, I thought I imagined it. People don't just knock around here this late unless something's already gone wrong. But the second knock was weaker, almost like whoever was out there was running out of courage. And the third one sounded like a plea. When I opened the door, the world split open a little. A woman in a torn dress, shaking face bruised in shades you don't see on paint charts, blood on her forehead, and fear written everywhere else. She whispered, "Please, just let me inside." And I swear to you, something in me recognized that kind of fear like an echo of the man I used to be and the mistakes I used to make. I hesitated, yeah, but only for a breath. Then I stepped aside and let her in. She collapsed right past me, light as a bundle of dry sticks. I wrapped her in a blanket, set her on the couch, and watched her eyes linger on the photos of my late wife Lila, as if she was trying to measure what kind of man kept smiling faces on the wall like that. When she finally spoke, she said her name was Anna. Soft voice, shaky words, somebody who'd forgotten what safety feels like. I didn't press her. People talk when they're ready. The next morning, I gave her the last real food we had left. A bowl of leftover chicken rice I'd been saving for my daughter. But the way Anna, or whatever her name truly was, held the spoon told me she hadn't eaten a peaceful meal in days. Giving it to her wasn't generosity, it was instinct. You help the person bleeding on your floor. Later that day, she told me the truth. Her name wasn't Anna. It was Olivia March. And she wasn't just running from a bad night. She was running from a life that looked pretty on paper with money and mansions and security teams, but in reality was a cage built by her stepmother and the man she was supposed to marry. The kind of man who says love, but means control. The kind who leaves bruises that don't fade. I listened. She talked. And, for the first time since Lila died, I felt something shift in me. Like this wasn't just a stranger. This was someone fate had shoved into my doorway because I was the only idiot soft enough to open it. What neither of us knew then was that my building, my home, was owned by March Industries, the very company her stepmother controlled. And she had people watching the tenants, including Mrs. Delaney, my elderly neighbor, the closest thing Zoe had to a grandma. Turns out she'd been reporting anything unusual for years. Not because she wanted to, but because she feared losing her apartment. Poverty can twist good people into shapes they don't recognize. Meanwhile, Olivia bonded with my daughter in ways I didn't expect. Zoe showed her drawings, taught her how to braid yarn dolls, offered her favorite stuffed giraffe with no hesitation. Watching them felt like witnessing something I didn't think I'd ever see again, a home healing around a stranger. But you know stories like this, right? Peace doesn't last long. One evening, the hallway went quiet in that dangerous way. A knock sounded. Calm, polite, wrong. I opened the door to find a man in a tailored suit, shoes so shiny you could see lies in the reflection. Julian Ashby, the fiancé she'd run from. Behind him were 2 men who didn't bother pretending to be anything other than muscle. "Mr. Hayes," he said with a smile slick enough to slide off the walls, "I'm here for something that belongs to me." He stepped inside like he owned the floorboards, dropped a folder on my coffee table. Inside were photos of me. Mugshot, incident reports, a court record I'd tried to bury. When I was younger, I'd nearly beaten a man to death for threatening Lila. Spent 2 years in prison. I paid for that mistake every day after rebuilding myself piece by piece. But Julian weaponized it in seconds. "See, Olivia," he said, "you never really escaped violence. You just found another version of it. I'd never wanted to hit someone more in my life. But my daughter was in the next room, and Olivia was shaking so hard she could barely breathe. Rage is easy, restraint is hard." After that, things spiraled fast. Olivia tried to run again. Julian tightened his net, and Mrs. Delaney, terrified and pressured by Olivia's stepmother, accidentally tipped off the wrong person at the wrong time. 2 days later, they took Zoe. I got the call while I was heading home from the diner where I wash dishes on weekends. "Hearing that your child has been kidnapped. It's like the earth disappears and you're left falling with no bottom." Julian used Zoe to force Olivia into signing a marriage contract. He dragged her to his estate, showed her my crying daughter tied to a chair, and waited. Olivia did what any broken, terrified person would do. She signed. Then she grabbed a bottle of pills off his desk and swallowed them all. If she died before the wedding, the money went to charity. Julian wouldn't get a dime. She chose death over ownership. I got the news at the police station. They told me Zoe was safe. Then they told me Olivia wasn't. My legs just gave out. I cried in front of strangers because grief doesn't care who's watching. But the world wasn't done twisting. Olivia wasn't dead. The paramedics who revived her were part of a plan she had secretly arranged with a doctor who'd once worked for her father. A doctor who'd discovered evidence that Olivia's stepmother actually murdered her dad by tampering with his brakes years ago. The fake death bought them time to gather proof, expose corruption, and flip the empire upside down. The final confrontation happened at the March estate. Olivia walked in alive. Julian was in handcuffs, trembling as he learned the woman who raised him had murdered his father too. His whole life had been a lie shaped by someone else's greed. And for the first time he looked less like a monster and more like a man who'd been molded into one. But justice isn't neat. Victoria, her stepmother, pulled a gun when the police arrived. She aimed at Olivia. Before she could fire, Mrs. Delaney stepped in front of her, grabbing her arm, forcing the shot downward. The bullet hit her instead. She fell into my arms, her breath shaky, her eyes full of regret. She apologized for everything. For spying, for betraying us, for letting fear run her life. I forgave her. Not because she deserved it, but because forgiveness was the only thing she didn't have to die without. Victoria was arrested. Julian testified. The empire fell, and in the rubble of all that power and greed, something gentle survived. 6 months later, I opened a small restaurant named Lila's Table. Olivia used a part of her inheritance to turn Holloway Court into affordable housing, a place where no one would ever be evicted for being poor. Zoe called Olivia her new mom without hesitation. And for the first time in years, I let myself believe I wasn't destined to break everything I touched. Sometimes the person you save ends up saving you right back. Sometimes your greatest shame becomes the thing that shapes your strength. And sometimes opening the door costs you dearly, but gives you a whole new life in return. So now, I want to ask you something real. If you were in my shoes that night, would you have opened the door? Would you have given away your last meal? Do you think people can escape their past, or do you think the world never lets them forget it? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Argue, debate, tell your own story if you want. And if this one hit you in the chest, even a little hit, share it with someone who needs a reminder that kindness is messy but powerful, and subscribe for more stories that dig into what real justice looks like. See you in the next one.